Hello, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. I'm Rick Anthony. For the past several years, I've been enamored of an organization in Washington, D.C. that you may or may not have heard of, you probably haven't heard about, the World Future Society. As the name suggests, there's a group of very bright, inquisitive people who try to peer into the future to determine what's coming at us, and then provide counsel and help people understand the implications of what's coming at us. They look out 10, 15, 20, 50 years and look at where the trends are going in every aspect of our lives, every aspect of our economy, every aspect of our culture, not just in this country, but around the world. The data they collect, the way they turn the data so that it has practical application has been really fascinating for me as I've watched them over the years. I have the very great pleasure today of having the deputy editor of a publication called The Futurist, a magazine that is published every other month by the World Future Society. His name is Patrick Tucker, and he's visiting with us today. Welcome, Patrick, to the Entrepreneurs Network.
Thank you so much.
Patrick was also with us earlier today at a meeting of the Entrepreneurs Network, where we present 5 early stage companies, and you had the opportunity to visit with some wide-eyed early entrepreneurs, some of whom are in life science, healthcare, consumer products, and so on, the full gamut. And I was interested in how you were reacting to what you were seeing and hearing, but we'll get to that in a moment. As we always do, what's your background? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And how did you become a futurist, whatever that is?
Yes, we'll get into what a futurist is, and then you'll see that it's a term that can people can wear in all sorts of different ways. I am from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I went to Sarah Lawrence, where I studied writing and wrote a lot, and then went on to Johns Hopkins to further study writing, a lot of science writing. Worked as a newspaper reporter in New Mexico, also for the Albuquerque Journal, and finally got hooked up as an editorial assistant many, many years ago with the Futurist magazine, the World Future Society, and I immediately realized that it's the best job in the world. My job is to go and find the smartest people in the world and ask them about the future, what they see as the future, how they see the future changing, how they see what they are doing as changing the future, and also to talk with people in government, academia, public policy about the future trends that are driving the counsel that they give our leaders, citizens, and everyone else. And my job,
and governments as well, yes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. We've had members in government since the Society's founding. Gerald Ford was one of the first speakers at the World Future Society conference. Ted Kennedy also spoke at the World Future Society conference. It's a nonpartisan group. We've had both Newt Gingrich and Al Gore call themselves futurists and be futurists, because the future is really up for everyone. And when you look at Washington, D.C. thinkers, decision makers, you find...
Washington, D.C. thinkers sounds like an oxymoron these days.
I understand. This is a very natural reaction. It's not entirely divorced from reality. But when you talk to the ones that are interested in doing something constructive, if you will, the nerdiest ones, the ones who are perhaps the most imaginative and also the most serious, you find a tremendous passion for the future and the idea that the future is an open canvas, that something that we change and alter through our actions. And so what we look to do, all we look to do through the Futurist magazine, through the events that we put on, through our newsletter and publications, is create a neutral clearinghouse of ideas about the future where the smartest minds of our time can discuss what the future can be, what it is, what it should not be. And so that is what we do. And so I began talking to people, interviewing people and writing about the major trends of our time, and I've never left. And so now, after 12 years of doing that, and since 2005 with the World Future Society, I can say that I am a futurist. Now, what is a futurist?
Yes,
what is a futurist? Okay. This is an excellent question, because there are a lot of different organizations that have very different opinions about who gets to call themselves a futurist. There are various professional consultants in various capacities. Intel has a professional futurist. His name is Brian David Johnson. Wonderful man, brilliant, very hooked into the future of information technology, and also microchips and computer hardware. Cheryl Connolly is the official futurist for Ford Motor Company. A man named Dale Evans is the official futurist for Cisco. They look at big data and information technology infrastructure, and these are all professional futurists.
Yeah.
There is, in fact, an organization called, the Association of Professional Futurists. And so, according to that particular line of reasoning, a futurist is someone you pay lots of money to tell you about the future, and hopefully they're worth their salt. Our opinion on this issue is this. If you have a prefrontal cortex, you already are a futurist. You evolved a big portion of your brain to constantly take information that you are experiencing and apply that to some sort of action that you are going to commit to. And to do that, you extrapolate a pattern. You create an idea about what's going to happen. You make a prediction. You do this constantly. You spend 70% of your mental time thinking about the future, not necessarily well. And so what we would like everyone to do is to A, acknowledge that you spend your time thinking about the future, that the future has direct ramifications for you, and B, understand that the future is not a place. It is not a destination. It's not something you're going to hit accidentally. It's something you're creating now. So be a better futurist and understand the major movers that are shaping the world we live in right now.
But you make the distinction between predicting the future and foretelling the future.
Yes, exactly, because the future is not an absolute. It's not an absolute. The only reason to talk about the future, to think about it, to look at the trends that are shaping it, is to change it. If the future is unchangeable, it has no value. And so what we do is we gather together the best thinking about what's going into the future, and we put it side by side. And some of these forecasts are extremely concrete. There's a tremendous amount of research that goes behind them. Most demographic forecasts that come from the World Health Organization, for instance, or the U.S. Census, are considered among the more, on the spectrum of probability, always have a higher likelihood of coming to pass than those that do not. We'll have 9.2 billion people on this planet in the year 2030. 2/3 of the global population will live in a water-stressed environment. Soon...
2/3?
Yes, by the year 2030, if no action is taken.
Yes.
All of this is mutable, but these are among the types of forecasts that you can know with a higher degree of certainty than other forecasts within the realm of technology and technology development.
So futurists are exquisite numbers crunchers? Obviously data and data mining.
Yes.
And you're an expert in that because your upcoming book, next in 2014,
Yes.
Includes predictive analytics, which is data mining.
Right, exactly.
And the title of your book coming up is?
It's The Naked Future, What Happens in a World That Anticipates Your Every Move.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in our conversations, I don't want to go off on a tangent. Well, I will go off on a tangent. That's fascinating.
Yes.
And the implications of that are startling.
Yes.
For the people who make goods and services, provide goods and services.
Yes.
An auto dealer, for example, to be able to use predictive analytics to know even before I come into the showroom or make a contact that in all likelihood I'm going to buy a red model something or other with these options and I'm only going to be willing to pay so much money.
Yes.
As a retailer, if you will, I want to know that even before the consumer knows it.
Yes.
If I understand it correctly.
This is within the realm of possibility, and certainly technological capability right now will do you one further. Imagine being that auto dealer and knowing when the customer is going to come in, what sort of model they're going to be most open to purchasing, what service contract, what leasing contract they would be most open to entering into, and also knowing, based on the way that person drives, when they will come in for service and what sort of service they will want, and when they might elect for a different car, and perhaps even their lifetime consumer value, the entire future of their car purchases. Now, one of the things that I write about in The Naked Future is how this is a capability that right now exists in limited way in a handful of some very large, well-funded organizations. But what we see with it, what we will see with it, is the same fundamental trend that we see across information technology, and that is technology democratization. The cost go down, and this capability suddenly comes into the hands of consumers.
Yes.
So take, for example, the instance that we were just talking about. Imagine someone else knowing that information about you, being able to infer your future car purchasing and even car driving behavior with a very high degree of credibility. As a consumer, it sounds unnerving. It sounds like someone knows more about me than I want them to know. So if it's someone else knowing a lot about your future, and you not having that information, we're talking about a dystopian world, surveillance state that everyone hates. But when you talk about the consumer having that information for themselves, and suddenly they know their own propensity to wear down the muffler on the car, they know their own propensity to pay an extra $2,000 for a cherry red paint job instead of light blue. They know their own propensity for entering into leasing contracts that give them a low monthly bill.
I see what you're saying. Yes.
All of a sudden,
it's like knowing my own strengths and weaknesses, what I am likely to do.
Right, and that
even unconsciously.
Exactly, and that is a superpower.
Yes, we're a long way from that, but what we are living with. The last couple of political campaigns, for example, the use of predictive analytics, huge databases,
yes,
to be able to predict behavior patterns of large segments of the population, the slicing and dicing that political pundits do.
Yeah.
That troubles me because it seems that they're sucking out whatever is left of the democratic process in this country.
Yeah.
And my right to use my one man, one person vote to try to make a difference. So
Yeah.
I'm making myself clear?
Yes, yes.
That bothers me.
Well,
And so there is a dark side to everything we're talking about as well, or
Yeah.
everything you're talking about in your book.
yeah. There is a lot to be alarmed about. There's certainly a great deal to be vigilant of. So the case in point that you were just talking about, I spent a little time talking with some of the data folks on the Obama campaign, and what they did was sort of called a miracle, in many ways.
Yes.
But really, what it boils down to is this: expert record keeping. And they would have databases, this is true, but they didn't have just one huge database where you could go and query it as you would Google, and it would output to you, here's this person, they have a high likelihood of voting Democratic so long as you tell them this or understand them this way. It's more like we have a group of people that subscribe for updates, and we can hit them with a request for a donation for 50, and they will give 50, and if they do not give 50, we can hit them for a request for a donation, and they'll hit 20, or they won't hit 20. We can call them and ask them to attend a meetup, and this number of them will attend a meetup. If we call and ask them to attend a meetup, there is this percentage of them will go on and tell somebody else, or will campaign for us, or will phone canvass for us, or will volunteer for us. So there are people that registers, they didn't actually spend that much time looking at how people are driven by issues. They looked at people entirely on the basis of the record they have of their previous interactions with them as a campaign, and then just made a very strategic management decision to leverage those people in the correct way based on the data that they had about them. And that's a little bit different from attempting to, as a politician, read somebody's soul. And they actually gave that up. All they wanted to do was simply use the assets that were at their disposal a little bit better. But it did have this effect. It seems strange and invasive and creepy.
In the magazine and the electronic newsletter that you send out to members, there are various categories: demographics, government, environment, politics, retailing, healthcare, and so on.
Yeah.
Have those verticals been in place from the beginning, or almost from the beginning? And how far back does the Future Society go? You were founded when?
We were founded in 1967, and there was a formal understanding of how to evaluate trends making up the future then. So the actual sectors that we put in place, that we look at the future through as a sort of lens: demographics, government, environment, commerce, science, technology. And these are the main movers that shape what humans do and how humans respond to one another. And they've moved back and forth in different years. We cover them in lots of different ways. I'm always most enthusiastic talking about science and technology. Now, science and technology forecasts have a history of perhaps failing spectacularly, but science and technology speaks most fundamentally to what the future is, which is a thing that we create. And sometimes it's something we literally create, an object that's in front of us that can change the entire world very, very quickly. So in the current issue of the magazine, we're running a huge special feature on disappearing futures. These are things...
top 10 disappearing futures,
yes. These are things that won't be around necessarily in the year 2030. And,
like doctors.
Like...
Stores.
Yes. It's very bold.
Smartphones.
Smartphones, exactly. Now, a few years ago, the idea of that everyone in the entire world would carry around an extremely powerful device that was orders of magnitude better than the desktop devices that had already revolutionized the world 2 decades ago, which was also orders of magnitude more powerful than the enormous room-size computers built, actually, at the University of Pennsylvania, the ENIAC, in the 1940s and 50s. This was the way in which that would disrupt the world was unforeseeable to many people, but not necessarily to everybody. If you understand information technology as being an extremely important force that drives down the costs of doing lots of everything else. But there was one person in particular. This is an example of somebody who wouldn't necessarily call themselves a futurist, but is very much a futurist as far as I define it. Jeff Hawkins, the creator of the Palm Pilot. It was the first handheld computer.
I still have one of those.
Oh, really?
Really, yes.
Oh, I should.
Probably belongs in the Smithsonian.
There's actually a computer museum in San Francisco where they have the Palm Pilot. Revolutionary device. It was the forerunner to the iPhone. Extremely ambitious, very pioneering, never quite hit the right cost structure to really be the iPhone. But in the 1990s, he went to Intel. Jeff Hawkins went to Intel right before he launched this thing. And he told everyone at Intel, Gordon Moore was their creator of Moore's Law, and other luminaries of computing. He said, listen, a few years from now, computers aren't going to be things on desks. People are going to carry them around, and this thing's going to cost actually about $400. He actually sort of called the price point of what would later be the iPhone. This thing's going to cost $400. It's going to change everything. The reception he describes as chilly at best, because he was going to disrupt an established business model. And now we understand that he was absolutely and completely correct. That is futurism. A bold projection of how something you are working on may revolutionize the world, how something that someone else is working on may cause huge ripples.
You see innovation around the world, because you travel the world talking to these experts.
Yes.
Are there certain areas where you see more innovation percolating up and the practical application of these brilliant ideas, as outlandish as they may seem today, having an impact on the way we live in the not too distant future? And can you give me 1 or 2 examples of those? Where is it coming from? Is it coming from different parts of the world, different cultures?
Yes.
Are they coming from countries where there is more or less government support and encouragement of innovation and entrepreneurship? I don't know which of those questions you want to try to answer, but take a shot.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing. It's really a mosaic. There is so many different ways for a people, for cultures, for governments to support innovation or stand in its way. That the short answer to the question is yes. Just yes in general.
Take your pick.
Yes. There is, for instance, in countries with a strong tradition of science technology, you find Germany and Japan are really leading the world on materials science, which is extremely important for the future, because these are formal fields, and you need a strong educational system to create awareness and literacy there at a very early age. Japan is an interesting case in point. It's not given a lot of credit for being really supportive of entrepreneurs, and yet there's also tremendous technological innovation that happens all the time. It's not a shortage of innovative people in Japan, and it's certainly not a shortage of technologically literate people in Japan. There's a government structure which sometimes works wonderfully to support innovation, which sometimes does not, but it's constantly trying to fund innovation. So this is how you get the Shinkansen. This is how you get the world's best pound-for-pound broadband network. And you also get certain government boondoggles, like the Osaka airport.
Yes.
It's a very different approach than we take. There's a lot of direct government funding of different research initiatives, but there isn't a great sector of bankers to support startups. This is what they're missing. But what they do have is great government funding of innovative research efforts and very ambitious research efforts. It works out really well for them. In other parts of the world, you have, in Africa, for instance, you have startups that are creating tremendous opportunity with almost nothing. I mean, you look at mobile phone penetration in Africa, and the new types of businesses that are suddenly being created right now on the ground with almost no help whatsoever. It's astounding. There's a startup founded by a shepherd who is in the Ivory Coast, and it's cell phone based, and what it is a network that he's assembled of all of the different people that also have livestock, mostly goats, and they communicate with one another via SMS or text message, and so they can predict where the goats are going to go, and they cut down their time. And you pay a subscription to be part of that network and see, based on information that everyone collects and distributes together, how to shepherd better and reduce your time in the field. This is completely bare bones. India continues to have tremendous assets in information technology, software development. Brazil and even Iran. We think of Iran as a completely, we have a perception of Iran in the West, let's be frank, and particularly in the United States. I talked to some people there that were affiliated with nanotechnology, and what they're doing is creating new types of fertilizer that will allow them to grow a lot more different types of food in a lot different environments. And this is actually, in many ways, this research initiative is a indirect result of actual sanctions. They're having a hard time importing food. So the Iranian government is funding really interesting nano-fertilizer initiatives.
Necessity is the mother of, isn't it?
Yes. And the United States, I have to emphasize this too, because I want to directly confront this notion of declinism. We have outrageous assets, and we are one of the few cultures, one of the few markets that is both extremely large, but also where entrepreneurs and a great idea and a good business plan have, and being a small shop can absolutely work in your favor, and you can find the sort of support that you need to really begin to thrive. And I would say this too, I would, though we should continue to be, I think, aware of the fact that China is rising in terms of science, technology, and also wealth. They are now publishing more patents than us. I think we have to see that as a net good thing. More smart people in the world is better. A rise in middle class, even though it can stress global resources, is a net boon for democracy and for commerce, always. And also, I think a lot of because we're talking about international areas of innovation. For a long time, I think the last decade, you can characterize the last decade this way: American anxiety about the movement of manufacturing to China. This was what we just had 10 years of. This hand-wringing, this fretting, the hollowing out of Detroit, large sections of Philadelphia, the continued hollowing out.
And entire industries wiped out. Textile, for example.
And manufacturing, chasing cheapest labor around the world, finally sort of landing in China because they pegged their currency to ours and have a number of assets that let them depress the price of labor. This changes in the next 10 years, entirely because of innovation. When you combine cutting-edge technologies like 3D printing, which is basically desktop factory manufacturing, this is how it should be understood, with advanced materials, with robust automated data collection and artificial intelligence, allowing people to understand, create a prototype, create a product, and deliver that product to market at scale by anticipating future scale.
Is the result of that manufacturing, 21st century manufacturing, coming back to the U.S.?
Yes.
Is that the point?
Yes, but not in the form we first experienced it.
Right.
All of a sudden, a garage out of Ohio
Yes.
is doing the job of a Beijing manufacturing facility that was doing the job of a factory in Ohio.
And that's got to produce much more volatility than we have now, because these resources are popping up all over the place.
Yes.
Regulation is almost impossible to enforce.
Yeah.
And so you need a different culture, a different system, so that it becomes more self-regulating. I'm way out of my field, but it seems to me
That's
where we're
great. That's
going.
very futury thing to do.
I think that's where we're going.
Yes, keep thinking of this. Is to be out of one's field is to be firmly in the future.
Okay, well, all right.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
in the future.
So there's peer-to-peer networks. There's peer-to-peer credibility,
Yeah.
which in many ways is already replacing something like regulatory frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the way. Look at Amazon as an economic ecosystem.
Yes.
Okay, so you have buyers and sellers. You have big retailers and great big companies that simply sell product direct to consumer through Amazon, and you also have a thriving market that they scooped from eBay of secondhand goods, in which case the credibility of reviewer, the credibility of seller, and even the credibility of buyer is all something that is transparent to all parties at the same time. And so that takes the place in many ways of a larger, more slow-moving regulatory framework.
Patrick, one of the reasons you're in town is to sit with us and talk about a seminar coming up, the title of which is Designing the Future. As you go around the country, this country particularly, and you talk with C-level people, large corporations for the most part, and try to give them a glimpse, vision of the future, again, out 50 years or whatever. What's the reception you receive? And are they able to take the macro picture that you are describing for them and take it and apply it to their industries, to their businesses, so that they begin to understand the future is not 50 years out? The future is today.
Right.
I'm beginning to live the future now, and I have to prepare for it.
Right. Well, I tell you, I'm always...
Because as a society, forgive me, as a society, at least my experience has been, we don't pay attention to anything until it's right there.
Yeah.
There's example after example of it. Unless it's right there in front of us, we just don't pay attention to it.
Right.
When it's there, then we go kicking and screaming, and we go through a period of absolute chaos before we will get our act together.
Right.
Well, the future isn't quite there. 2045 isn't there yet. The predictions for 2030, with doctors being extinct and schools being extinct and everything else, that's still out in the future. Am I making my point?
Yes.
How do you bring it so that it's right there?
Well, that is the question that we ask ourselves all the time whenever we assemble something, is how to take a future that's far away and make it feel immediate, understand it in terms of the present. And when I talk to CEOs and executives around the country, I continue to be amazed by the amount of enthusiasm they bring to thinking about the future, because, I mean, again, getting into the question of what a futurist is, if you're someone that has to lead an organization, or lead a segment, or lead a department, or lead an office, your second job is futurist. You have to constantly understand your decisions in terms of their near-term and later-term ramifications, and if you do that, you'll start to make better decisions. So I'm continually amazed by the number of people, when I get off a stage, that have something interesting to tell me about how their organization is attempting to best leverage their assets to meet future opportunities. And also, I guess it's the type of person that goes and sees someone who is called a futurist. They'll describe to me the type of institutional stubbornness or resistance that they run into all the time.
Yes.
And a lot of the time we just wind up having a big sort of therapy session with all the people on hand to talk about how difficult it is to try and change the mind of a stubborn institution.
It must be fascinating.
Yes.
Once a year, the Futurist publishes predictions.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I guess I shouldn't call them predictions. Or are they predictions?
You can call them predictions because we publish them side by side, and we say these are information for you to start a conversation, to start a line of thinking. They often conflict.
Yes.
And we want them to conflict because they are merely sort of a roadmap.
What's been the scorecard since 1967, if anybody's keeping score?
The average futurist, in general, professional, in terms of specific statements about the future that have a high likelihood of coming true, it's about 70%.
Really?
Yes. Having said that, you can probably be 100% correct, but the vast majority of what you say will be uninteresting. It will be because it will be high probability, low impact. High probability, low impact is exactly the sort of predictions humans make perfectly.
And at my age, I won't be around to see whether or not it comes through or not.
Right, right. So we're.
What do you mean, right?
Right. Not necessarily.
Yeah, I understand.
But you know, the high impact, low probability forecasts, the ones that still come true, are always the most interesting. These are the sort of Babe Ruth shot to the bleachers, and you miss those, it's a car wreck.
Your book is coming out again in March of 2014.
Yes.
anyone who's interested in becoming a member of the World Future Society, they sign up, and depending upon, I guess, what level or whatever, you get a number of really good stuff. You get a book by the founder of the World Future Society,
Yes.
Edward Cornish. You get subscription to this wonderful magazine. You get a subscription to the electronic newsletter.
Yes.
And you get a lot of other reports.
Yes.
And I have them piled up on my reading pile.
Yes. And
On-
you also
on-
get a
on
discount to
special
the
areas.
conference.
And a discount to the conference. So it's a wonderful organization. I encourage you to look into it. Again, you don't have to be a professional futurist. It just makes very good reading.
Yes.
And does stimulate some interesting cocktail conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
We hope so.
Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. And we'll have you back when your book is out.
I look forward to it.
The
Thank
Naked
you.
Future.
The Naked Future.
It sounds like a good movie. I'll have to talk about that. Until next time, this is the Entrepreneurs Network. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves. Take a look into the future.